Bigger than movies and music combined, the video game sector is a multi-billion-dollar global behemoth. And our government has said game on, offering new subsidies for developers in Budget 2023. But not everyone playing games ends up a winner.
特别痛苦，这个人感觉他都要废了似的，就跟一个废人似的感觉，什么爱好也没有了，就是。
Over lockdown, North Shore local Lee's son began using his parents' credit cards to spend on in-game purchases called loot boxes. So how much money did your son spend on loot boxes?
就我知道得有几千块钱。
And when Lee tried to stop him, things took a dark turn.
发脾气大喊大叫，或是摔东西，最后要特别的疯狂，有时候就是砸，有时候砸自个儿脑袋。
He hurt himself when you cut him off from your credit card?
就拿拳头砸自个儿脑袋。
We're seeing games that are increasingly including simulated gambling or loot boxes that very much resemble gambling. And it is concern because it serves to normalise gambling, but it also can be really problematic.
Available in many of the world's most popular video games, loot boxes enable players to spend real money on digital prizes. And for some, they can be addictive.
We get parents calling us, you know, who are at crisis point because their child is gaming and they've discovered they're spending lots of money on loot boxes, microtransactions, whatever it might be. And, you know, we just don't want to see this problem becoming worse.
And staff at Asian Family Services say the problem is surging.
Yeah, we do have since 2020 and 2021, we do see triple of referrals from gaming-related harm as well for young people, refuse to go to school, and some of violence behaviours among families.
Since loot boxes in games aren't technically gambling under New Zealand law, there is no funding for any harm caused.
It's almost like competing with the industry. The gaming industry have $1 billion, and our poor NGOs and the government sector only have, I don't know, tiny, even the one drop of the ocean to compete at that online space.
And advocates worry we could be creating a new generation of gamblers.
We're going to see a whole lot of young people developing problems, and you know there's a pathway between problematic gaming and problem gambling as well.
And emerging evidence suggests it could already be happening.
We find that people who are at sort of initial period of data collection that have been purchasing loot boxes 6 months later, those people tend to be purchasing traditional gambling products at a higher rate than people who aren't.
Game companies that provide loot boxes argue that since they don't allow players to sell the contents for real money, they shouldn't qualify as gambling. But unofficial websites can and do. Earlier this year, an item in popular shooter CSGO sold for more than $500,000. The most expensive item to ever come from a loot box is worth more than $2 million. Real money in and real money out.
When you have issues of gambling-like mechanisms crashing up against, young people, particularly underage users, which the largest sort of player base still happens to be underage users in Aotearoa, I think that's a serious concern. You know, regulating those in some way, in a sensible, careful way, is something that's really important to consider.
The Australian federal government has drafted a nationwide law meaning any game containing loot boxes would receive an M rating, and any game with even simulated gambling would become R18. Other countries like Belgium have gone further, banning loot boxes outright. An approach industry here says goes too far.
It's definitely a very heavy-handed move, but any kind of tool or labeling system that enables parents to make more informed decisions, the industry has always been really supportive of. I think the challenge comes in where those ratings or those classification systems are ultimately making the decisions for the consumer.
In New Zealand, loot boxes have been on government's radar, with then Minister of Internal Affairs telling Newshub Nation in 2018.
Yeah, loot boxes, again, right now, unfortunately, they're not covered by our gambling laws. It looks a lot like gambling, but they just don't meet the criteria, and that's because our gambling laws are outdated.
We asked now Minister Barbara Edmonds when Martin's 2018 Gambling Act review would be completed. But half a decade later, her office says work is still ongoing, with no commitment on when we'll see results.
Look, I think we need to do something before things really do get out of control. I think our Gambling Act is, yes, absolutely out of date. It's not fit for purpose. So that needs to be addressed, and it needs to happen really soon.